Okay, so have you ever had that moment where like you're just staring at this huge pile of articles or research, maybe you're prepping for a presentation or like diving into some totally new subject and you're
Mm.
kind of overwhelmed.
Yeah,
And you just wish that there was like a shortcut, right? Like somebody could just tell you the absolute most important things you need to know.
totally.
Well, that's what we do here on the deep dive.
Absolutely.
And today we are diving deep into some really cool stuff that you sent us. It's all this research and articles on like how we believe knowledge works, especially in academic settings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really interesting how we think about what we think we know.
Yeah, exactly. It's like knowledge about knowledge, which gets kind of meta, but it's really important.
It is.
So yeah, in this deep dive, we are going to try to like pull out those really most important insights from all of this research about these beliefs and like why they matter so much.
Yes. Because they really do impact the way that you learn.
So true. So, like, the main idea that we're going to unpack today is that the beliefs that we have about knowledge, like what it is, where it comes from, how we learn it, those beliefs really have a huge impact on how you learn.
Yeah.
And there's a whole field dedicated to studying this called epistemological beliefs.
That's right.
It's a mouthful, but it's a fascinating area.
It is.
And what we're going to do today is we're going to figure out if these beliefs are kind of like, one size fits all, like you believe this about all knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
or if they actually change depending on like what you're learning. Like if you're learning calculus versus like, history or something.
Right. Like, is there something different about the way we think we know something in math
Yeah,
as opposed to in history or in literature?
exactly.
Yeah,
And hopefully we'll uncover some of those aha moments for you along the way.
for sure.
Um, so to kick things off, I think it's important to give a shout out to this great article we've got from the Educational Psychology Review. It's
Mm-hmm.
from 2001 by Michelle M. Buell and Patricia A. Alexander. Their analysis is really helpful in kind of laying out, how complex this whole area is and all the different layers of beliefs that are involved.
It's a really good overview of the research.
Yeah. Okay, so let's break down this term epistemological beliefs because it sounds super academic and like something you debate about, at 3 in the morning after way too much coffee.
Right.
But let's talk about it in a practical way. What exactly are we talking about here?
Well, simply put, your epistemological beliefs are just your personal ideas about what knowledge is and how we come to know things.
Okay.
And the study of knowledge, or epistemology, has its roots in philosophy.
Oh, I knew there was philosophy in here somewhere.
Right. So all the way back to ancient thinkers like Plato, around 400 BC.
Yeah.
He was really trying to figure out what are the essential elements of knowledge.
Yeah.
And he said, to have knowledge, it has to be true, you have to believe it, and you have to have justification for that belief.
Okay. So there's got to be a reason, a good reason, why you believe it.
Exactly. And a good example is the statement, humans are living organisms.
Okay.
So for
Yeah.
Plato, you only have knowledge of that statement if you believe it, and you can justify it with evidence.
Yeah.
Like the fact that humans reproduce and they need food and water to survive, things like that.
Right. So it's not enough to just believe it. You got to be able to back it up.
Right. You need a reason,
Gotcha. So belief plus good reason equals knowledge.
in a nutshell.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So where did this whole line of thinking lead?
Well, fast forward to the 18th century. Immanuel Kant comes along,
Okay.
and he introduces this really influential distinction between a priori knowledge, which is stuff we know before any experience, like basic logical truths, and a posteriori knowledge, which is stuff we learn through experience.
Got it. So a priori is like built in and a posteriori is learned.
Yeah, exactly. And then he goes on to talk about synthetic a priori knowledge, which is knowledge that's both necessary, like a priori, but it also tells us something new about the world, like a posteriori.
Okay, now that's kind of blowing my mind a little bit.
Yeah, it's a bit of a head scratcher.
So some of what we know, like the way we understand things, might be built in and influences how we approach even brand new information.
That's the idea.
That's pretty wild.
Ah,
So philosophy laid down these foundations, but we mentioned a psychological turn in your outline. So what happened there?
yeah, so moving into the 20th century, we see this shift in focus. Thinkers like William James, Charles S. Peirce, John Dewey, and even later Alfred North Whitehead, they all start to focus on how individuals actually think about and experience knowledge.
So it's not just about these big abstract ideas of knowledge anymore. It's about how real people actually process and understand it.
Exactly.
And they were really interested in this connection between knowledge and education.
Yes, and some really important works came out of this period. Dewey's Democracy in Education and Whitehead's Aims of Education are great examples.
Okay, so the philosophers were thinking about knowledge in this like theoretical way, and then these guys came along and were like, hold on, let's look at how people actually learn, especially in school.
That's a good way to put it.
What was the driving force behind this shift?
Well, a big influence was pragmatism,
Okay.
a philosophical movement really championed by Peirce and Dewey.
Okay.
And they basically said that the value of knowledge is in how useful it is, how it helps us navigate the world.
Right, so it's not just about abstract truth, it's about knowledge that actually makes a difference in your life.
Exactly.
Huh.
They didn't believe you could just figure out if something was true based on some abstract rule. They thought that knowledge is really tied to the situation, the experience in which it's used.
Okay, so knowledge has to be practical. It has to have a purpose.
Right. And as understanding human experience became more central to philosophical thought, the connection between knowledge and schooling just naturally emerged as a really important area of focus.
Right, because going to school is such a universal human experience.
Yes. And researchers became fascinated by how that experience shapes our beliefs about knowledge and how those beliefs then influence how we learn.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So it's one thing to, ponder the meaning of truth in some abstract way,
Yeah.
but it's a whole other thing to look at how those beliefs about truth affect how you study for a test or try to understand some new concept in class.
Right.
So is that when researchers actually started studying these beliefs in people?
Exactly. And that's the third key development highlighted by Buell and Alexander. The move from philosophical discussion to actually trying to measure and study the epistemological beliefs of people in general.
That's a big leap, right? From just thinking about it to actually trying to measure it.
Right. It was a big step. And of course, especially in those early days, studying these beliefs wasn't always the main focus of research. It was often part of broader attempts to understand thinking, learning, and how people make sense of the world, as we'll see in the work of William Perry.
Okay. So it seems like this field has evolved a lot over time.
Mm-hmm.
But Buell and Alexander also point out that studying these beliefs is not always easy, right?
Right. It's not always straightforward.
What are some of the challenges for researchers?
Well, one of the biggest ones is that a lot of our epistemological beliefs, they're kind of like the tip of an iceberg.
Okay.
There's a lot going on beneath the surface.
Right, they're hidden.
Yeah, we're not always consciously aware of them, actively thinking about them. It's not like we're walking around, constantly asking ourselves, what does it really mean to know this thing?
I know I'm definitely not doing that.
Right. And because they're often unconscious, these beliefs may not be very well formed or easy for us to articulate.
Yeah, you might have a feeling about it, but you might not be able to put it into words.
Right. And that's often compounded by the fact that in a lot of educational settings, the nature of knowledge itself, like what counts as knowing something or how we justify what we understand, it's not really discussed explicitly.
It's true. We don't often have those meta conversations in school about what it means to know something.
Right. So while you definitely have these beliefs, you might not have the vocabulary or the awareness to describe them fully.
And because these beliefs are so unconscious, we might not even realize how they're impacting the way we learn.
Exactly. And this makes it super tricky for researchers who are trying to assess these beliefs, especially in younger learners.
That's such a good point. We're so busy focusing on the content of what we're learning, we don't often stop and think about what it means to actually know that content.
Yeah. It's like we're missing this whole other layer of understanding.
Okay, so that's one challenge. What are some of the other difficulties researchers run into?
Another key challenge is trying to separate our beliefs about knowledge from our beliefs about knowing, like the process of how we come to know things.
Okay.
Philosophical literature makes these distinctions between different types of knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
and similarly, educational and psychological research explores various forms and levels of knowing, like knowing how to do something versus knowing facts about something.
Right, there are different ways of knowing something.
Yes. And what we've come to realize is that knowledge isn't this single, straightforward thing. It's much more multidimensional and multi-layered, as Alexander and his colleagues have argued.
So it's complex. There are layers to it.
Exactly.
Right.
And these different aspects of knowledge, they interact in all these complex ways. Sometimes they reinforce each other. Sometimes they contradict each other.
Oh, that's interesting. Can you give me a concrete example of that interplay between different kinds of knowledge?
Sure. Think about how your understanding of the world includes both informal knowledge, stuff you pick up just through your everyday experiences, and formal knowledge, the things you learn in school.
Okay, so like street smarts versus book smarts.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
And sometimes what you learn in a classroom might support what you already know from experience, but sometimes it might contradict it.
right. And that can be really confusing.
It can. And because knowledge itself is so complex, it makes sense that our beliefs about it would also be multifaceted.
Right. It's not a simple yes or no kind of thing.
Exactly. You might have a general sense of what knowledge is, but then have more specific beliefs about academic knowledge.
Hmm.
And even within academic subjects, your beliefs about what it means to really understand math, where there's often a right or wrong answer, might be very different from your beliefs about understanding history, which often involves interpreting different perspectives.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Like the way you approach learning math, where answers are often definitive, should be different from how you learn history, which involves more interpretation and critical thinking.
Exactly. So your approach to learning needs to be flexible and adaptable depending on the subject matter.
Okay, that makes sense. So, are these beliefs about academic knowledge also wrapped up with other beliefs we have about ourselves as learners?
Absolutely, because, academic knowledge is usually gained in a learning environment. Your beliefs about it can be closely tied to your beliefs about learning in general, your own abilities, how you view intelligence, and even the role of teaching itself.
So, all these different beliefs about ourselves and learning are kind of intertwined.
Yeah, it's like a web of interconnected ideas. So when you're asked these broad questions about knowledge gained through formal education, these other belief systems can easily get mixed in.
That makes sense. It's hard to separate them out.
It is.
And
And because they're so connected, it can be a real challenge to isolate and study epistemological beliefs in their purest form.
right, because all these other beliefs are influencing how we think about knowledge.
Yeah, and Buell and Alexander emphasized that researchers need to be really careful to either separate these related belief systems in how they design their studies and their questionnaires, or to untangle them carefully when they're analyzing their results.
Okay, so we've got a good grasp on what epistemological beliefs are and why they can be so tricky to pin down.
Right.
Now, let's talk about how researchers have actually tried to understand these beliefs.
Let's do it.
Our outline mentions some early research perspectives, starting with William Perry.
Yes.
What did his work contribute to this field?
Well, William Perry's research in the 1970s at Harvard was really foundational.
Okay.
Even though he wasn't specifically looking at epistemological beliefs, as we use the term today, his main interest was in the intellectual and ethical development of college students.
Okay.
And he conducted these really expensive, open-ended interviews with male undergraduates throughout their college years, and he noticed these patterns in how they talked about knowledge and learning.
So he was looking at how their thinking evolved as they went through college.
Yeah, that was his main focus.
And what were some of the key stages or perspectives that he identified?
Well, Perry observed that a lot of freshmen, when they came in, had this dualistic view of knowledge. They saw things in black and white terms, right or wrong, good or bad.
Okay, so very clear cut. There's only one right answer.
Yeah. But as students progressed through college, many of them shifted towards more relativistic perspectives. They started to understand that knowledge is often dependent on context and that there isn't always one single correct answer.
So they began to see the nuances and complexities of knowledge?
Right. And even beyond relativism, Perry suggested that eventually students often make commitments to certain areas of study or beliefs, although he didn't really explore this later stage in detail.
Okay, so their thinking matured and they started to form their own perspectives.
Exactly. And while Perry's goal wasn't specifically to study epistemological beliefs, his concepts of dualistic and relativistic thinking, they clearly involve these underlying beliefs about the nature of knowledge, its structure, its source, and how we justify it.
Right, it's all connected.
It is. And even though his interviews were in an academic setting, they were open-ended, so students could talk about a lot of different experiences, not just coursework.
So it wasn't just about what they were learning in class, but also how they were thinking about knowledge in their lives in general.
Exactly.
That suggests that as learners mature, they often move from this, absolute view of knowledge to a more nuanced understanding of its contextual nature.
Yeah, that was a key takeaway from Perry's work.
So Perry's work focused on male college students. What came after that? The outline mentions Belenky and her colleagues.
Right. So in their really influential book, Women's Ways of Knowing, Mary Field Belenky and her colleagues, Blythe McVicker Crenchey, Nancy Rule Goldberger, and Jill Medic Tarul, they actually offered a critique of Perry's work, specifically pointing out that he focused exclusively on male students.
Okay.
So they really dug into women's perspectives on truth, knowledge, and authority, drawing on the work of Carol Gilligan.
So they wanted to see if women's experiences and views on knowledge were different.
Yeah, that was their main focus. And they conducted interviews with a much more diverse group of women, 135 in total.
Wow, that's a lot bigger than Perry's sample.
It was. It included college-educated women, but also women from a wider range of ages, ethnic backgrounds, and social classes.
So they had a much more representative sample.
Yeah, it was a significant departure from Perry's homogeneous sample. And their initial interview questions were broader, too. They asked about significant experiences in their lives, not just academic ones.
So they were looking at knowledge in a much broader sense.
Exactly. So did they find that Perry's model worked for these women?
That's a good question.
Well, they found that it didn't fully resonate with the women's responses. It just didn't capture the richness and nuances of their experiences.
Okay.
So they proposed this whole new model, centered around the idea of voice rather than Perry's idea of perspectives.
Okay, so instead of stages of development, they focused on different ways of expressing and relating to knowledge.
Right, and they identified 5 epistemological perspectives, ranging from silence, where women felt like they couldn't express their own ideas,
Okay.
to subjective knowing, which
Okay.
relies a lot on intuition and personal feelings,
Okay.
to received knowing, where knowledge comes from external authorities,
Okay.
to procedural knowing, which emphasizes objective methods and procedures for gaining knowledge,
Gotcha.
and finally, constructed knowing, where knowledge is something you actively build and integrate with your own experiences.
Right, so knowledge is something you create, not just something you receive.
Exactly. Now, they didn't argue that these perspectives were exclusively female,
Oh, okay.
but their work really highlighted the role of personal experience and individual voice in shaping how we relate to knowledge.
Yeah, that's a really valuable addition to Perry's initial work.
Yeah, it adds a whole new layer to our understanding.
Okay, so it's interesting how the focus expanded from just intellectual development to include these different ways of knowing. The outline mentions Kuhn and King and Kitchener next. What did they bring to the table?
So both Deanna Kuhn and Patricia King and Karen Kitchener, they both built upon Perry's work, but they expanded the scope.
Okay.
They included individuals across a much wider age range, from adolescents to senior citizens, and they tended to focus more on general epistemological beliefs, like how they play out in everyday life.
Okay, so not just in academic settings.
Exactly.
So more real-world stuff.
That's right. Kuhn was really interested in the kinds of reasoning people use in their daily lives when they face what she called ill-structured problems.
Okay, so problems without easy answers.
Yeah, issues where there's no one right solution. Things like the causes of crime or why students fail in school.
Okay, I see. Those are definitely complex issues.
And she'd ask people to explain their positions and talk about their beliefs about knowledge and expertise.
And what were her main findings?
Well, Kuhn identified 3 main epistemological views that are all about how certain knowledge is and the role of experts.
Okay, so how much we trust experts and how much we believe knowledge is fixed.
Exactly. So first you have the absolutist view, where knowledge is certain and experts have all the right answers.
Okay, so very black and white thinking.
Yes. Then you have the multiplist view, where all opinions are equally valid because knowledge is uncertain.
Right, so everyone's opinion is just as good as anyone else's.
And then there's the evaluative view, which acknowledges that knowledge is often uncertain, but some viewpoints are better supported by evidence than others.
So you're still weighing the evidence and considering different perspectives, but you recognize that some arguments are stronger than others.
Exactly. And these views, they actually line up pretty well with the stages described by Perry and King and Kitchener.
Okay, so there's some overlap there.
Yeah. Now, King and Kitchener did this huge longitudinal study over 15 years.
Wow, that's impressive.
It was. They interviewed over 1,700 individuals about how they justify their beliefs when dealing with these really complex, ill-structured problems.
Okay.
Like, how were the pyramids built, or the objectivity of news reports.
Those are some good ones.
Right. And the reflective judgment model, or RJM, it outlines 7 stages in how people view the nature of knowledge and justify their beliefs.
Okay, so it's a more detailed version of Perry's ideas, going beyond simple relativism.
That's a good way to put it. And since their interview questions weren't specifically about school-based knowledge, their model reflects these more general epistemological beliefs.
Okay, so they were looking at how people reason about knowledge in their everyday lives.
Exactly.
Okay, so these early researchers really laid the groundwork by describing these different perspectives on knowledge and stages of development.
They really did. They were pioneers in the field.
Okay, now the outline mentions Baxter Magolda. How did her work build upon this foundation?
Well, Marcia Baxter Magolda's research in the late 80s and early 90s took a more direct focus on academic settings.
Okay.
She drew inspiration from Perry's interest in how college students learn and Belenki's focus on potential gender differences in how we approach knowledge.
So she was combining those two threads of research.
Exactly. And she conducted her own longitudinal study, interviewing college students about their learning experiences throughout their undergraduate years,
Okay.
and even after they graduated.
So she was really looking at the long-term impact of their beliefs about knowledge.
Yeah, and her interview questions were designed to get at their beliefs about learning, about classrooms, like how they viewed the roles of students and teachers, how they thought learning should be evaluated.
Okay, so she was specifically looking at their experiences in academic settings.
Exactly. But she also included questions about their fundamental beliefs about knowledge itself.
Okay, so she was trying to understand their epistemological beliefs in the context of their education.
Exactly. And she even developed a specific tool called the measure of epistemological reflection to assess these beliefs.
Okay, so she was really trying to measure those underlying beliefs.
She was. Now, what kind of model did she propose?
Well, she found that Perry's original model didn't quite capture all the nuances she was seeing in her students' responses. So she created her own model called the epistemological reflection model.
Yes, that's right.
And this model describes 4 different ways of knowing in academic settings. So first you have absolute knowing, where knowledge is certain, and it's transmitted by authority figures.
Right. So the teacher or the textbook is the source of truth.
Exactly. Then you have transitional knowing, where students start to recognize that maybe knowledge isn't always so black and white.
Yeah, they start to see some shades of gray.
There's some uncertainty.
Yes.
And then you have independent knowing, where students see knowledge as more subjective and all opinions are equally valid.
Right, so everyone has their own truth.
And finally, you have contextual knowing, where knowledge is constructed and evaluated based on the evidence within a specific context.
That's the most sophisticated level in her model.
Okay, so it's all about considering the context and the evidence when evaluating knowledge claims.
Yeah, okay.
It's really interesting that her model goes beyond just those purely epistemological beliefs,
Yeah.
and it includes students' beliefs about the roles of learners and teachers and their ideas about assessment.
It does. It provides a much more holistic picture of students' perspectives on learning.
Right, it's not just about knowledge itself, but also about the whole learning process.
Exactly. But as Veal and Alexander point out, this approach does mean that her model kind of mixes epistemological beliefs with other related belief systems.
Yeah, so it might be harder to isolate those specific beliefs about knowledge.
That's one of the challenges.
Okay, so these early perspectives, as influential as they were, often viewed those beliefs about knowledge as kind of like unidimensional, like we move along a single spectrum from absolute knowledge to relative knowledge.
Yeah, that was the prevailing view for a while.
But then Marlene Schamer comes along and proposes a very different view.
Yes.
What was her perspective?
So in 1990, Marlene Schamer challenged that whole unidimensional view. She argued that epistemological beliefs are better understood as a system of more or less separate dimensions.
Okay, so instead of one single line of development, there are multiple dimensions to these beliefs. What were those dimensions?
Well, she proposed 5 of them.
Okay.
First, you have the structure of knowledge, and that ranges from simple, isolated facts to complex, interconnected concepts.
Okay, so how we see knowledge being organized.
Yeah, exactly. Then there's the certainty of knowledge, which goes from absolute and unchanging to tentative and evolving.
Right. Do we see knowledge as fixed or something that can change over time?
Exactly. And then there's the source of knowledge, which can be anything from external authority to personal reasoning.
Okay, so who or what do we see as the source of truth?
Yeah. Then there's the speed of knowledge acquisition,
Yeah.
which is about whether learning should be quick or if it takes time and effort.
Right. Do we think we should be able to grasp things immediately, or is it okay for it to take time?
And finally, there's the control of knowledge acquisition, which is about whether our ability to learn is fixed or something we can develop and control.
Okay, so is intelligence innate, or can we improve our ability to learn?
Exactly. And her thinking was influenced by a few different people. Perry, for example, on the structure, certainty, and source dimensions.
Okay.
Carol Dweck's work on beliefs about intelligence influenced the control dimension.
Okay.
And Alan Schoenfeld's research on beliefs about math learning influenced the speed dimension.
Got it. So she drew on a lot of different research to develop her model.
She did. And it was a really important contribution because it highlighted that our beliefs about knowledge are not just one thing. They're multifaceted.
We can have different beliefs about different aspects of knowledge.
Exactly.
And how did she actually study these different dimensions of belief?
Well, she developed the Schamer Epistemological Questionnaire, or SQ,
Okay.
which is a paper and pencil survey where students respond to statements using a Likert scale.
So they indicate how much they agree or disagree with a statement.
Exactly.
And what did she find?
Well, factor analysis of the responses from lots of college students revealed 4 relatively independent factors,
Okay.
which she interpreted as representing more naive epistemological viewpoints.
Okay, so these were kind of like less sophisticated views of knowledge.
Yeah, you could say that. And the factors were innate ability, the belief that intelligence is fixed, simple knowledge, the belief that knowledge is just a bunch of disconnected facts,
Okay.
quick learning, the belief that learning should happen quickly,
Mm-hmm.
and certain knowledge, the belief that knowledge is absolute and unchanging.
Gotcha. So these are all kind of like simplistic views of knowledge.
You could say that, yeah.
Okay. And did other studies support these findings?
Yeah, later studies with both high school and college students confirmed these 4 factors, and they also showed some developmental trends where younger students tended to hold more of these naive beliefs.
That makes sense, right? As you learn more, your understanding of knowledge becomes more complex.
Yeah, that's the general trend.
But I imagine Schamer's multidimensional view and her questionnaire weren't without criticism, right?
Oh, of course not. Researchers like Barbara Huffer and Paul Pintridge, as well as Jin-Kyu Kian and Donna E. Alverman, they raised some questions about the interpretation of those 4 factors.
Okay, so they weren't fully convinced by Schamer's findings.
Right. For example, they argued that the innate ability and quick learning factors might actually be more about students' beliefs about their own intelligence and the nature of learning.
Okay, so not so much about knowledge itself, but about how we learn.
Yeah, that was their critique.
Yeah.
And Keen and Alverman's own factor analysis of the SEQ data actually suggested a slightly different structure with only 3 factors,
Okay.
one of which combined items related to both the simplicity and certainty of knowledge, which they called simple certain knowledge.
Interesting. So they saw those 2 dimensions as being more closely related.
They did.
And did anyone else propose an alternative model?
Yeah, Hoffer and Pintridge later put forward their own 4-dimensional model.
Okay.
It focused on certainty, simplicity, source, and justification of knowledge.
Okay, so they kind of refined Schamer's original dimensions.
You could say that, yeah.
Hmm.
Now, even though some of the items on Schamer's SEQ might have blurred those lines between beliefs about knowledge and other related beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
her work was still super important
Okay.
because it provided a way to actually measure these beliefs quantitatively and on a large scale, which paved the way for a lot more research.
Right, so it made it easier for other researchers to study these beliefs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it allowed them to start investigating how those beliefs actually relate to how well students learn.
Okay, that's a key question, right? Do these beliefs actually matter in practice?
They do. And the development of the SEQ and other similar instruments allowed researchers to move beyond just describing those different ways of viewing knowledge and actually study how they relate to things like the learning strategies students use, their reading comprehension, and their overall performance.
Right, so they could start connecting those abstract beliefs to actual learning outcomes.
Exactly.
And what were some of the key findings from this new wave of research?
Well, for example, some studies found that students with more dualistic beliefs, those who saw knowledge as simply right or wrong, they tended to rely on memorization when trying to understand something new.
Okay, so they focused on just memorizing the facts.
Yeah. But students with more relativistic beliefs, those who understood that knowledge is often contextual, they were more likely to try to apply the knowledge, to think critically about it.
Okay, so they engaged with the material on a deeper level.
And those relativistic students actually often achieved higher grades.
So the way you think about knowledge really does affect how well you learn.
It does. And Schomer's own research found that students who really believed in quick learning, they were more likely to jump to conclusions and overestimate their understanding.
Right, so they thought they understood something when they maybe didn't.
Yeah, they didn't have that deep understanding. And those who strongly believed in certain knowledge were more likely to draw very absolute conclusions, even when the evidence was ambiguous.
Interesting. So their beliefs made them less flexible in their thinking.
Exactly.
Uh.
And research also showed that those who believed in simple knowledge, the idea that knowledge is just a collection of facts, they tended to have poorer comprehension of more complex texts and use less effective study strategies.
Okay, so the way you view knowledge can really affect how you approach learning.
It can. And all those findings highlight how important our beliefs about knowledge are in our academic journeys and our ability to think critically.
Wow, this is also fascinating. So now one of the big questions is, are these beliefs pretty consistent across all the different subjects we might learn?
Right? Like, are my beliefs about what it means to know math the same as my beliefs about what it means to know history?
Exactly. This is where the idea of domain specificity comes into play.
That's right. And for a long time, a lot of the research kind of assumed that epistemological beliefs were relatively stable across different academic subjects.
Okay, so like a one-size-fits-all approach to knowledge.
Yeah, but then researchers started to consider,